Good evening, everybody. How are you? Great. Yay. A response. My name is Eddie Vella. I'm the Associate Dean in the College of Behavioral and Social Sciences. And, well, before I make my introductions, what I'd like to do is to invite Dr. Gail Hutchinson, Dean of the College, for her to come up and extend her welcome and make some comments for you. So, Gail, to you, I should say.
Great. Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the College of Behavioral and Social Sciences Colloquium. And I just have a few comments to make tonight, but I am thrilled to see all of you here, and hopefully you had an opportunity to enjoy all the fine posters that we have out behind your seating area. You know, I had an opportunity this morning to actually attend a lecture by a professor emeritus of sociology, no less. His name is Dr. Walt Schaefer. I don't know how many of you remember Dr. Walt Schaefer. And Walt is a great guy. He's not only a scholar and a fabulous teacher, he's, I would say, quite a bit older than I remember him, and he's still cycling, and he's done marathons, and he has rafted whitewater. He used to teach a course on managing stress, and today he gave a lecture at the International, or the Interdisciplinary Center on Aging, and it was a great lecture, and it was about stress and stress management. What he reminded me, and I know this, but what he reminded me, and I really liked how he did it, is that, you know, stress is really good. There is good stress, and there is bad stress. And there is opportunity when you are faced with a challenge to really use and engage in positive self-talk to really rethink this negative stress you're feeling and try to turn it into something positive. And I was really struck by that because I bet, like many of you, I try to live my life that way, that when I see a challenge, I try to turn it into an adventure. And when I see a challenge or I see a barrier, I try not to see it as hitting a wall, because when I do, that makes me kind of, I think, look down and get maybe down on myself and down on others and not think creatively. And when I think about all the challenges that we face in the world today, we really do need to keep a hold of our creativity. We really do need to keep a hold of our innovation, if you will. And that got me thinking about research and why we're here tonight. Whether the method is experimental, explanatory, or descriptive, research is a creative act. Whether theoretical or pragmatic, research is paramount to knowledge building and problem solving, two essential ingredients in our intellectual lives here at the university. As behavioral and social scientists, we seek to deepen our understanding of the local and global, economic, political, and social systems, both past and present, and find solutions to contemporary social and behavioral challenges. Our scholarly contributions are often referenced in discussion and debate, and at times influence policies in ways that help sustain, improve, or build democratic, even egalitarian communities and societies. Our research, our scholarship, our creative acts, we share it with our students in earnest, hoping to ignite their passion for discovery and appetite for critical thinking. At the Colloquium tonight, we honor the scholarship of some of the faculty and students in the College of Behavioral and Social Sciences. And after having read their posters and engaged in lively conversation with the presenters, I think you will agree that our faculty and students are strong scholars making important contributions to their respective disciplines. And I personally want to, at this moment, thank the faculty and students who actually presented their posters tonight. I would like to congratulate Dr. Diana Coyle, who earned the opportunity as our keynote speaker this evening. And I want to let all of you know in the College of Behavioral and Social Sciences, faculty, staff, and students alike, that we are very proud of you and your accomplishments, and greatly appreciative of your teaching, service, and scholarship. To that end, I also want to say to the audience, to the folks whom I really don't know, but I'm really glad you're here, thank you for turning out tonight, because you too helped make this evening special. And then I want to close with a special thanks to the student ambassadors who are helping, but more importantly, and I want Kathy and Eddie to raise their hands. Kathy Castleberry, where are you? Kathy Castleberry for her coordination and organizational skills, which are essential to the success of this colloquium. And would you join me with a round of applause? And also to Eddie Vella, my associate dean, who is leading this charge. And if I didn't thank him, no one would, because he is the MC for the evening. So with that, I want to thank Eddie for your leadership and also your administration of this fine event. It is because of these two individuals that we ensure the BSS Colloquium remains a high-quality signature event for the college. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much.
All right. Like Gail, I'm happy to see so many people come tonight. A lot of students. Clap if you're a student. There are a lot of students. How about the faculty? How many faculty do we have here? Thank you for the students again. And I know we have administrators and people from the community, so sincerely, thank you for coming tonight. Appreciate it very much. And you know, it's an event like this can't happen without the help of a lot of people, and I do need to thank some people. And but first of all, the person I do need to thank is the person who, without this person's approval, financial support, we wouldn't be able to do this. And this is the dean of the college, Dr. Gail Hutchinson. So Gail, thank you very much for continuing to support this very important event. Sincerely. Of course, a big thank you goes to all the BSS faculty who put the time and energy to create all the posters that you see back there. I think you will agree that they were pretty interesting, quite varied. Yes? Did everyone vote for the most interesting poster? You still have time. In any event, they do represent the diversity and the creativity of the scholarship among our faculty, and that's part of what we wanted to do tonight, is to showcase BSS generally and highlight one of our stars specifically. Of course, I also want to thank the staff in the dean's office, especially Kathy Castleberry, as Dean Hutchinson pointed out. She made sure all the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed, and made sure all the background things happened very smoothly. So, Kathy, once again, thank you so much. Where are you, Kathy? Thank you. Yes. All right. Let's see. And let me see. Who else do I want to thank? Oh, yes, the BSS ambassadors. Ambassadors, are you here? Raise your hands. They're back in the back. They're in the front. So thank you for helping out tonight. I appreciate that. Actually, I was looking for someone, but thank you. You don't know these people, but I do need to make, because this is being recorded, I need to thank Mr. Chris Ficken and Mr. Johnny Poon for working with our poster presenters. They're the ones who produced and printed all the posters that you see, or most of them anyway, and have several of them at the last minute. And so they've been very good friends to the college, and so I thank you both very much for your help. Well, the BSS Faculty Colloquium is now in its 9th year of existence. It's a forum in which we recognize a faculty person for their scholarship, and one in which their scholarship has been recognized by the wider academic community. Our past honorees have been recognized by both national and international faculty for their work, and our current honoree certainly is no exception. Tonight we highlight the accomplishments of a remarkable person, Dr. Diana Sheppard. Dr. Sheppard received her PhD in 2000 from Utah State and joined us as an assistant professor back in 2006. Is that right, Diana? And then she has been going blazing since then. She's currently an associate professor in the child development department. So join me in congratulating both Diana and the child development department for having such a fabulous faculty person. Dr. Sheppard was recognized in 2010 by the Chico State's Faculty Recognition and Support Committee for significant professional achievement. She's actively involved in new research that recognizes the unique role that fathers play in the development of the children. She is a contributing editor and chapter co-author in 2 special issues and in a book on the role of fathers in the development of children. In collaboration with both national and international colleagues, Dr. Sheppard's research involved the study of general parenting and more recently to a focus on children's attachment to their fathers. Glasses. making important new contributions seriously to our understanding and appreciation of the role that fathers play in the development of their children. Yes, fathers actually make a difference. I think it's important to add that Dr. Sheppard really does exemplify the teacher-scholar model. Her work is routinely integrated into her classroom teaching, and it informs her teaching generally. Her students benefit from the fact that she's up to date in her field, and they witness firsthand how research generates new knowledge and how that knowledge becomes part of their own educational experience. Equally important to note, especially newer faculty, I think, is that she has strategically and wisely collaborated with colleagues at other institutions, allowing her to excel in both teaching and research. In this way, she provides a model as to how faculty at institutions with heavy teaching loads and who lead very busy family lives, as she most definitely does, can have a successful career both as a scholar and a teacher. So, without further delay, what I'd like to do is to introduce and welcome Diana Sheppard. Please put your hands together and help me welcome her.
So my address this evening is going to provide a brief overview of key concepts and premises of attachment theory and parent-child attachment, the focus on mother's contributions and more recently father's contributions to children's development. Based on our own research and a review of others' research on fathers, I will discuss current methodology and findings. I want to thank my department chair, Dr. Cindy Radican, for her confidence in my scholarship and for nominating me. And I further appreciate the confidence in my colleagues for highlighting the scholarship at the faculty colloquium. I am very aware of the outstanding work that other faculty within the college are engaged in, and I'm honored to address you, students, and other guests this evening. My interest in attachment theory began in graduate school at Utah State University. I remember hearing about John Bowlby's theory in a class and being fascinated by implications of the statements he made about early care experiences and the profound effects they had on individuals' personality and emotional development. His statements regarding loss and separation of children from their parents and how such experiences had significant long-term effects on development deeply affected me. And as I studied the concepts and premises of this theory and the research, I found a theoretical foundation that has been the focus of much of my own scholarship and in which I incorporate frequently into my teaching. John Bowlby's theory and Mary Ainsworth's supporting research contributed to one of the most important theoretical achievements in the scientific investigation of personality, emotional and social functioning, and development. We're going to watch a little film clip narrated by Sir Richard Bowlby, John Bowlby's son, which provides a brief overview of attachment theory and some key concepts.
The science of family bonds, which researchers call attachment theory, was started in the 1950s by my father, John Bowlby, who died in 1990. He was a child psychiatrist who was also a scientist, and in 1952 he wrote a book called Child Care. Had too many different meanings for a scientist, and later he called the kind of love that children feel for their parents attachment, children's attachment to their parents. After the Second World War, he was asked to write a report about the mental health of children growing up in orphanages. The staff were very worried about the children caused their problems. At first, my father thought it was the lack of mother love, because the orphans hadn't got their mothers. But then researchers began to see that children who'd become attached to a member of staff had better mental health than children who hadn't become attached to anyone. The problem wasn't so much the absence of someone who loved the child. It was more the absence of someone whom the child loved. These children hadn't become attached to anyone, and this had affected their mental health. My father then started to refer to children's attachment figures, because it isn't clear from people's job, nanny, carer, teacher, or even granny or mother, whether or not the child is actually attached to them, and that's what really matters. There's usually something uniquely special about the attachment that a child has to one attachment figure, which is most often the person who is raising them, usually their birth mother. In order to be strictly scientific, my father called this person the child's principal or primary attachment figure, because they have the greatest influence on the child's well-being. And the other caring people the child knows and loves he called subsidiary or secondary attachment figures.
Okay. Well, that just gives us a nice little overview for those of us who may not be as familiar with attachment theory. All right. John Bowlby worked at Tavistock Psychiatric Clinic in London, where he directed a research unit focused on children's separation from parents. He was interested in the negative effects of prolonged separation that can occur early in life between mothers and their young children, due to regular hospital stays for maternity or surgeries, or for other reasons. Many English families were disrupted by World War II, which ended in 1945, and children were frequently separated from their parents and sent to the country where it was thought that they would be safer. Other children were orphaned because of the war and had been moved into institutional care facilities. Bowlby wanted to develop a perspective approach that would allow psychoanalytic scientists to make predictions about children's future emotional functioning. In developing his theory, Bowlby was influenced by Lorenz's studies of imprinting in birds and Harlow's primate studies. Bowlby viewed human infant reliance and the emotional bond with the mother to be the result of a fundamental instinctual behavior system. Bowlby based his theory on the biological foundations of attachment behaviors that are important for survival and protection. So infants' instinctual, genetically based attachment behaviors such as smiling, vocalizing, crying, signaling, or clinging are social signals that actively promote survival. The attachment behavioral system is designed to increase proximity to an attachment figure. Child behaviors are adapted and directed towards specific care providers. They become a core behavior system from which a child functions. Over time, interaction patterns with attachment figures become hardwired. They're activated automatically whenever the child is exposed to similar experiences. Each behavioral system is innate, goal-directed, and adaptive. For children, the exploratory and play system, the social system, and the ABS help them adapt to their world and get their needs met. The primary goal of the attachment system is to elicit care, comfort, and safety from a care provider. During infancy, the goal of attachment behaviors is proximity to the attachment figure so these needs can be met. Later, the goal of the AS becomes felt security, which is defined as the psychological state of feeling secure. As children grow older, proximity is not always a possibility. We go to school, we spend time away from our attachment figures. We need to be able to think about those attachment figures or perhaps just talk to them so that we feel that sense of reassurance and comfort when we do become distressed or anxious. Mary Ainsworth was an American developmental psychologist and a colleague of Bowlby's. She conducted observational studies of mothers and infants in Baltimore, Maryland, and Uganda, Africa. She was interested in understanding the conditions that activate children's attachment systems and the conditions that resulted in their termination. From her research, she determined that the ABS works like a thermostat. It's activated when a person is distressed, ill, hurt, or afraid. For infants and young children, it's activated when they are involuntarily separated from their attachment figure or when they have physical needs. It terminates when those needs are met. Bowlby believed the AS remains functional over the lifespan because there really is never a time when humans outgrow the need for comfort and reassurance when we're ill, frightened, or distressed. That cycle of experiencing distress or threats, seeking protection, and gaining comfort from an attachment figure reduces stress and leads to felt security. That allows us to return to other interests and activities. The positive resolution of the cycle helps individuals develop successful emotional regulation and facilitates the regulation of interpersonal closeness. Repeated daily interactions with caregivers create a pattern within specific relationships. It is the pattern of interactions, not individual behavior, that reveals the attachment style of each relationship. Not all attachment relationships are positive. It depends on the quality of the interactions the child experiences with caregivers. When an attachment figure consistently demonstrates sensitivity and are responsive to bids for assistance and comfort, this relational pattern increases the likelihood of felt security or secure attachment. Ainsworth described attachment as a mode of relating to a specific figure. Thus, it's possible to have different attachment patterns for each significant relationship. Nearly all individuals become attached, but only to a few persons. Attachment figures are not simply close relationships. A child's bond to an attachment figure is with someone who is perceived of as stronger and wiser, such as a parent. And children attach to their parents. Parents do not attach to their children. Parents don't rely upon their children normally when they are distressed for comfort and reassurance. It's more of a one-way kind of relationship from parent to child. It isn't until we move into adolescence or adulthood that attachment relationships become reciprocal, where we can serve it as an attachment figure and also get our needs met with another attachment partner. So it's more of a partner relationship that's reciprocal as we grow older. There's 4 functions or dimensions that distinguish attachment relationships or attachment figures from other relationships. The attachment figure is a target for proximity seeking in times of need or distress. The attachment figure provides a safe haven, offering comfort and reassurance when we're upset. An attachment figure serves as a secure base, allowing the other person to pursue non-attachment goals while maintaining a sense of confidence and security. According to Ainsworth, the hallmark of attachment is the child's use of an attachment figure as a secure base for exploration and socializing. If you watch young children playing in a park, for example, they may explore the equipment and possible social interactions eagerly, but they often look back, check to make sure that their mother is available or close at hand. And if they become frightened or distressed, they often will signal to that mother or retreat back to her. For adults, the presence of a secure base encourages exploration and cognitive openness to new information and experiences. It promotes the confidence necessary to take risks, to learn, and continually update our models of self and others. And then the last dimension that distinguishes attachment figures from other relationships is unavailability evokes anxiousness or separation distress. The cognitive affective structures of expectations and beliefs about oneself, attachment figures, and others were described by Bowlby as internal working models. Initially, they're based on a person's experiences and memories of attachment figures during regular care routines and from attempts to obtain comfort when distressed. In infancy and early childhood, working models represent specific relationships with caregivers. Once formed, they tend to operate automatically and unconsciously, making them resistant to change. Bowlby said that during the first 2 to 3 years, the pattern of attachment is malleable. The pattern can change if the parent significantly changes the way they interact with the child. The models can be described along a continuum of opposites. Based on early care experiences, others are viewed as either responsive, comforting, and trustworthy, or non-responsive, inconsistent, interfering, or untrustworthy. Separate models develop for each parent and close relationship. Models of self are also relationship specific, and they can range from a view of ourselves as lovable and good to unlovable and not good. Models of self may differ based on our roles, such as a son or a daughter, friend, spouse, or parent. They become increasingly complex as relationships outside the family are formed. Over time, more abstract general models of self and others evolve. And as children grow older, the pattern or their style of interacting becomes increasingly the property of the child, which he or she tends to impose upon new relationships. Thus, working models become core features of personality, carried forward into new relationships. So the definition of personality is defined as fairly stable traits, patterns of reacting and interacting with others and the environment. Ainsworth developed an observational procedure to classify attachment patterns. It was based on extensive home observations of mother-child interactions. It's the most widely used standardized measure of mother-infant attachment. The SSP contains 7 3-minute episodes. First, the parent and the infant are alone in a room with toys. A stranger joins the parent and the infant. The parent leaves the infant and the stranger alone. The parent returns, and the stranger leaves. The parent leaves, the infant is left completely alone. The stranger returns, and then the parent returns and the stranger leaves. 4 categories of behavior are measured and observed during the strange situation procedure. Separation anxiety, the unease the infant shows when left by the caregiver. The infant's willingness to explore in a room with toys. Stranger anxiety, the infant's responses to the presence of a stranger. And reunion behavior, the way the caregiver is greeted on return. Initially, Ainsworth identified 3 styles with mothers and infants ages 12 to 18 months. The secure style, avoidant, ambivalent or resistant, and later a 4th style, disorganized, was added by Main and Solomon. This particular style is associated with children's experience of abuse and neglect, or the experience of a parent who might have bipolar disorder or clinical depression, or the parent may have experienced abuse themselves. It's the most common style in children who experience early institutionalized care. The strange situation procedure can and has been used with fathers. When used with fathers, the findings have been inconsistent. Paternal sensitivity ratings have often failed to predict child attachment security, and some scholars believe that these observational techniques fail to capture typical father-child interactions. Early research identified mothers as primary attachment figures because they provide daily caregiving and comfort. Secure attachments to fathers, when compared to mothers, produced fewer significant and less sizable effects on children's social and emotional development. And fathers were initially relegated to a subsidiary attachment role. But Bowlby suggested that fathers and mothers may contribute in different but complementary ways to children's social, emotional, and personality development. That mothers provide calming and comfort in times of distress, but fathers' propensity for more active physical play and their tendency to promote risk-taking open their children to the world while providing encouragement and security. That isn't to say that mothers and fathers can't engage in the same types of behaviors, caregiving, and play, but some current research suggests that children experience these interactions with each parent differently. Based on the findings of the Grossman and colleagues' longitudinal study of German families, they concluded that child-father and child-mother attachment relationships derive from different sets of early social experience and consequently should be assessed differently. As part of a special journal issue in which we served as guest editors, my colleague Dr. Lisa Newland and I interviewed Sir Richard Bowlby, the son of John Bowlby, and asked him to discuss his father's work and current research on father attachment. That interview appears in the journal Early Child Development and Care, volume 180, published in 2010, as the father's role as attachment figures, an interview with Sir Richard Bowlby. He told us that by the 1980s, my father valued the role of fathers much more, that fathering involved a greater emphasis on play, mentorship, and encouragement of the child in the face of challenges. Sir Richard Bowlby said, quote, "I believe that we also need to examine the instinctive human need for discovery, enjoyment, and a sense of achievement, and to look at the emotional and social implications for children's development when these needs are not met. Whether young or old, we seem driven to explore and to seek new experiences, and there's a potent neurochemical reward when we do. But we need to feel sufficiently safe in doing so, or we're too frightened to continue. To optimize our chances of being successful, we need two distinct systems in place. The first is to know that there is a secure base to return to when the activity ends or goes wrong, and the other is having a trusted companion to show the way. The Grossman's longitudinal research described a father-specific quality as security and exploration. Their findings suggest that father's role as an attachment figure during the preschool years may be to provide security through sensitivity and challenging support as a companion when the child's exploratory system is aroused. In their 22-year study, they found it predicted children's social and emotional adjustment from kindergarten to young adulthood. This figure, provided by Sir Richard Bowlby, illustrates the complementary roles of primary and secondary attachment figures. Here, fathers and mothers share the dual complementary role as primary attachment figures, with mothers typically serving as a secure base for their children's exploration, providing greater comfort when needed. Fathers typically serve as a play companion who foster children's exploration and risk-taking, but also serve as a secure base, providing comfort or reassurance when needed. Other secondary attachment figures, such as grandparents, older siblings, friends, care providers, or teachers, may provide security and exploration opportunities as well. Fathering and father involvement has been studied for the past 70 years. Dr. Michael Lamb, a recognized authority on the role of fathers in children's development, stated, "The positive effects of father involvement are more likely to be experienced in specific contexts that must be theorized, modeled, and tested in new studies of fathering. Current research has included more information from and direct participation by fathers. The development of new measures designed to capture the aspects of father-child relationships that are unique are more pronounced, and analyses that control statistically for mother involvement. In the past, analyses rarely controlled statistically for mother involvement when examining father involvement as a predictor of children's development. Significant positive correlations are generally observed between mother and father involvement, reflecting the mutual influence between parents. More recent studies that have controlled for mother involvement have shown that father involvement continues to be associated with better psychosocial adjustment in offspring through adolescence and adulthood. The unique influence of father involvement has also been associated with lower delinquency rates, fewer externalizing and internalizing problems in boys, greater mental health, fewer antisocial behaviors, and better academic outcomes. About 4 years ago, the chief editor of Early Child Development and Care, Dr. Roy Evans, invited us to submit one of our manuscripts for a special issue on fathers' contributions to children's development. That began our deeper investigation into fathers' role in children's attachment relations, and we observed in our data sets that one of the unique predictors of children's attachment security to fathers was fathers' report of roughhousing or physical play with their children. We observed this in a preschool sample and later in a school-age sample. As we began presenting this research at conferences, we became acquainted with other researchers in Argentina, Australia, and Canada who were reporting similar findings about the effects of father attachment on children's development. This led to a special issue of Early Child Development and Care published in 2010 and then later republished as a book in 2011. Emerging topics in father attachment, considerations in theory, context, and development contains 15 empirical and theoretical reports from practitioners in 8 countries, and it was the first to be organized around the singular theme of attachment to fathers. The reports are organized within 2 primary foci. the conceptualization and measurement of the father-child relationship in infancy and early childhood, with a particular focus on attachment processes, and the examination of predictors and outcomes of child-father attachment across developmental periods from infancy through young adulthood, within multiple contexts, including individual, couple, family, and cross-cultural systems. Among the contributors to this issue is Dr. Daniel Poquette at the University of Montreal. His article describes the activation relationship theory. When we were in Montreal in 2011, attending and presenting at the biennial meeting of the Society for Research in Child Development, he gave us a tour of his lab and explained to us his theoretical and methodological approach that involves comparing dual-parent families based on the degree of differentiation between parent functions. The activation relationship theory provides a framework for understanding the unique ways in which fathers promote children's development through stimulation, combined with appropriate amounts of discipline. He said, for fathers, the emotional bond occurs through an activation relationship, which develops primarily through physical play. Dr. Poquette and his colleagues designed a new observational procedure as a complement to Ainsworth's strange situation procedure for children ages 12 to 18 months. They now also have a preschool-age version. This 20-minute observational procedure takes place in an unfamiliar room. The child is presented first with a social risk, an increasingly intrusive male stranger, then with a physical risk, a set of stairs or a ladder for preschoolers, and then is forbidden by the parent to climb. The RSP assesses activation in parent-child relationships by examining behaviors which promote child exploration and some risk-taking. The child is invited to take progressive risks in order to trigger the activation system. In the RS procedure, the parent is asked not to interact with the child and especially not to encourage the child to explore. However, the parent may comfort the child at any time and is asked to ensure the child's safety and protection. The coding grid identifies children who are underactivated. They engage in little exploration, are more passive and anxious, and remain close to their parent. This has been found to be related to parental overprotection. Overactivated, evidenced by reckless risk-taking and disobedience when the parent sets limits. And activated. Within activated parent-child relationships, the child shows a balance between exploration of the environment and the acceptance of limits imposed by a parent. Studies of the RSP show that children of involved, differentiated parents, care by the mother and play by the father, display more highly developed social skills and are better prepared for competition and cooperation than the children of parents who are both involved but whose roles are more or less interchangeable. It's been observed that within several Western countries, fathers often engage their children in a form of physical play that, when approached in a sensitive, responsive manner, can enhance the quality of emotional relationship between the fathers and the children, and children's own competence in other domains. We're going to watch a movie clip from the Australian film The Boys Are Back, which illustrates the type of physical play and risk-taking that Western fathers are more likely to engage in with their children, which is more typically done in the absence of mothers who may not be that supportive. Oh, let me let it boot maybe for a minute. I don't know why it looks like that. It's pretty, but that's not what we're looking at. There we go.
Did you submit? Did you submit?
No! I'm the king of the bed! I'm the king of the bed!
Tag team. You and Artie versus me.
Yeah!
No, I'll pass these. It's
Hey,
fine.
don't get away that easy, big boy.
Yeah!
Jesus! got to be kidding.
Good, eh?
That is so high.
I know.
But if the wire breaks...
Oh, don't worry about the wire. The wire's fine. I'm trying not to think of that branch falling on him.
But seriously, if you let go...
Well, that's why he's hanging on so tight.
Nice one. Oh.
Be careful.
I think you rather enjoy upsetting mothers.
What gives you that idea?
Yeah. So you're chuckling. I would guess that some of you are aware that fathers engage in some behaviors that mothers may not always approve of, that they might do when they're not with the mother, right? I know in talking to Dr. Poquette, he said that part of the risky situation procedure, he has fathers do free play with their children too. And if the mothers aren't present, the free play is almost always rough and tumble kinds of play, and sometimes pretty extreme, like swinging the child way up in the air and swinging them between their legs, which the moms might have been like, what are you doing? You know, too much. But that children clearly enjoy, just probably not the kinds of things that some of their mothers might be doing with them. Another colleague, Dr. Richard Fletcher at the University of Newcastle in Australia, leads the Fathers and Families Research Program. In a recent article he contributed to one of our guest-edited issues, he described RTP. It involves physical contact, some rules, and mutual enjoyment. Daniel Poquette emphasized that it's necessary for the father to dictate the rules and to be perceived as somewhat dominant. Fear in games can add excitement and pleasure. And RTP usually begins in toddlerhood, peaks about ages 9 or 10, trailing off as children become adolescents. Sensitive fathers manage excitement levels within the limits the child can manage, recognizing when a child becomes very upset, frustrated, or angry. Fathers can stop the game or take a break to cool off. Richard Fletcher and his colleagues created a new observational measure for evaluating dyadic RTP between fathers and their preschoolers. Analysis within an Australian sample showed that the quality of RTP to be negatively associated with problem behaviors in children after they controlled for father involvement in caregiving. So in other words, they did measure father caregiving tasks, but when they controlled for that, they still found that RTP predicted children's problem solving, or a reduction in problem solving. So there was something unique about that type of play style that was beneficial for children. The learning that happens in RTP includes understanding and managing emotions, as physical play, roughhousing, can lead to frustration, anger, humiliation, and rage. And if you've ever done this with young children, you know they can get kind of upset when it doesn't go the way they want. Fathers' responses are important. Warmth, sensitivity, and control are key dimensions of parenting associated with children's positive social, emotional, and cognitive development. Sensitivity or attunement to the child is demonstrated when the parent accurately reads the child's needs and responds contingently to these cues. During RTP, father's ability to model appropriate emotional responses, to stay positive when the child is failing and getting frustrated, and to stay calm in the face of anger, his or the child's, provides important modeling of emotional responses and control. Reading social cues. Children learn how to interpret an opponent's mock cries for help, or if he or she has gone too far, how to respond to a real reprimand or limit setting by his or her father. Gross motor skill development, how to use large muscles in arms and legs, how to balance and arrange your weight, and controlling aggression. Children learn how not to be aggressive with appropriate RTP. In the current father play research, risk-taking is defined as fathers challenging their children to explore their world within an optimal range, neither too safe or easy or too difficult or risky. Risk-taking encompasses a sense of both exhilaration and fear, and is a phenomenon that many children, especially boys, seek in their play activities. Appropriate risk-taking in RTP have been associated with individual skills, increased confidence, self-esteem, and resilience. In naturalistic observations of fathers with their 4 to 5-year-old children at home in a U.S. sample, active fathering is associated longitudinally with lower child dysregulation, during problem-solving tasks, and higher sociability in the home. Social skills. RTP may help maintain friendships because enjoyment is the key emotion. In contrast, fighting among children is associated with unstable friendships, where the key emotion is anger. Several studies have shown that the frequency of father-child play fighting is associated with the development of social skills and greater popularity among male peers, as well as fewer problems with peers. And Poquette found that the more a father and his child engaged in battle games, the less likely the child was to exhibit signs of aggression with peers throughout development. And health benefits. RTP provides exercise and gross motor skill development. Research with school-age children has shown that fathers' active physical play is related to children's obedience, competition, and emotion regulation. In our research with families of school-age children, we developed our own instrument, a school-age child survey measure of secure exploration, which measures children's perceptions of father's supportiveness and availability when children are nervous or excited, encouragement for children to try new things and to take risks, and roughhousing. Our studies of fathers in the U.S. and Taiwan have shown that father's secure exploration and risk-taking contributed to children's social-emotional development, in particular higher self-esteem, self-reliance, and better interpersonal relations with parents and with peers. A more recent study of ours examined father education-related beliefs, perceptions, school-related involvement, father-child secure exploration, and child school outcomes in the U.S. and Taiwan. We found that higher secure exploration with fathers predicted lower negative attitudes towards school and teachers. This association was stronger in the U.S. sample. And higher academic self-concept. Interestingly, father-child attachment was not related to school achievement, which suggests that attachment of fathers may be more predictive of social, emotional school outcomes than cognitive outcomes, at least within the samples included in these studies. My colleagues, Dr. Lisa Newland and Daniel Poquette, continued our research of the complementary roles of mothers and fathers as they relate to children's development, which led to another special issue for early child development and care entitled The Unique Contributions of Mothering and Fathering to Children's Development. This special issue contained 13 reports representing academic and practitioner-oriented papers from researchers working with ethnically and socially economically diverse families in the U.S., Taiwan, Australia, and Canada, across developmental periods in infancy, toddlerhood, preschool, and school age. Researchers identified similarities and differences in mother and father involvement practices and interaction styles, and differential impacts on children's linguistic, social, emotional, and behavioral outcomes. In most studies, both mothers and fathers reported at least some involvement in caregiving and also some involvement in reading and playing and roughhousing with their children. Within older samples, both parents also reported involvement in transporting their child to activities, assisting with homework, and attending school events. In addition, parents seemed to be similarly responsive to children's needs, regardless of differences in interaction styles. Thus, while mothers and fathers may take on differential roles within families, roles often overlap, and parents balance their involvement with other demands. These reports also indicated that contextual influences, particularly parental work involvement, needs to be taken into account. These studies examined child factors such as gender, birth order, age, and temperament, parent factors such as education level, mental health, well-being, sense of efficacy or confidence, beliefs and perceptions, social support and stress, couple and family factors, couple satisfaction and consensus, co-parenting, work constraints, extended family support, gender roles, culture and nationality. Some of these factors appear to impact mother and father involvement differently, and mother and fathers may view their co-parenting relationship differently than their partner does. Thus, examining both mother and father views and interactions within the couple and family system is important. In our call for papers, we received several manuscripts that focused more specifically on the measurement of father-child activation relationships and father-school involvement, which led to a third special issue focusing on fathers. Fathers and Development, New Areas of Exploration. This issue will contain 7 articles that examine father involvement using newly developed observational measures, which appropriately capture the unique characteristics of father-child interactions, including RTP and activative fathering, and associations with children's social emotional development. Fathers seem to play a major role in the process of opening children to the outside world, which is linked in particular to the development of autonomy and the management of risk-taking during the exploration of physical and social environments, fostering the development of physical and social skills, self-assertiveness, anger management, and academic and professional success. 2 summers ago, my husband and I took our 7 children, ages 13 to 23, to Costa Rica. While walking one morning, the boys found a 2-story wooden scaffolding that offered a better view of the bay below. We all climbed up, but coming down, we experienced a minor problem with our oldest daughter. It was clear that she'd become very aware of the height and the distance from the first landing to the ground. She was afraid to jump. All of her siblings offered encouragement and were willing to help catch her, but she was adamant. "I want my daddy," she cried down at us, and kept saying it until my husband came and stood below her and helped her down. She wanted her dad, and no one else would do. As scholars, we now understand what many parents have known for a long time, that the different behaviors and responses of mothers and fathers may have similar positive effects on children's attachment security. If mothers provide a safe haven for children to return to when distressed, fathers appear to provide a safety net as their children venture out and explore the world. Children need both for optimal social, emotional, and personality development. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sheppard. We have time for a couple of questions, and I believe we have an open mic. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and we have folks on either end who have a microphone. So please ask your question in the microphone so everyone can hear. Thank you. So any questions, comments?
Could you comment on the use of oxytocin to increase the father's involvement?
You know, that's not an area of research that I'm very familiar with. I know that there is some research looking at ways to enhance the bonding that can occur between fathers and their young children, and yet that's not really an area that I have explored in my own research, so I'm unfamiliar with that. What we have observed is that once fathers get beyond sort of the fears of the infant and the fragility of an infant, like I want to be really careful, you know, with this small child, usually it's in toddlerhood where they finally feel like, okay, now I can play. And there's something about that play experience that really enhances the emotional relationship between fathers and their children. But I've observed, and our colleague, Dr. Richard Fletcher, specifically talks about how fathers can bond with their infants, how do fathers learn to be attuned and sensitive to infants. And so I would say that there certainly is research out there looking at that, but I don't do that research, so I'm afraid I can't provide you with other information. Yeah.
Hi, Dr. Sheppard. I have 2 questions. One, did you notice differences in outcomes for male and female children, sons or daughters? That's one question. And my other question is, what do we do to, I mean, maybe this just takes it to some other level, but what do we do to address the kind of epidemic of the absence of fathers in homes?
Yeah, you're talking about this trend that we're seeing, that although fathers who are in, usually in married relationships are more involved than they've been in the past, so spending more time with their children, we also have a significant portion of families in which fathers are absent from those homes, and therefore the children don't have the benefit of time spent regularly with that, non-residential father. But your first question had to do with gender differences, wasn't it? And it is true that fathers typically engage in RTP more with their sons than they do with their daughters. In Poquette's research, he found that about 37% of fathers said that they daily engaged with sons, and it was closer to maybe 10 or 12% of fathers who said they did that daily with their daughters. And it appears that sons often elicit more physical play from their fathers, not that daughters don't enjoy it, because they clearly do enjoy it. And there are positive benefits for both males and female children when they have RTP with their fathers. But there certainly is some research that says that it happens more often in father-son dyads. And there are some benefits in some of the studies that extend more to male children than they do to female children. Sure.
Was there any of this research done on homosexual couples by any chance?
I'm afraid not. The research recently, the RTP research, father activation relation research, it's only been in the last couple years. And so I can imagine that as this research expands beyond heterosexual couples, that it could be explored within gay couples, lesbian couples, and to look and see, does RTP happen? What are the benefits of RTP within those relationships? But there just hasn't, to my knowledge, been research done yet in that area. All right.
My question is, has any of this research had an impact on the way that you raise your children within your family?
That's one of my children. Well, I would say that attachment research certainly has. You were all pretty young when I was in graduate school and learning about attachment research, but I didn't really do a lot of RTP with you, I have to say. I think your father did, and I know that you really enjoyed RTP, and I think you benefited from doing it, but you probably remember that I wasn't terribly involved in that kind of play with you. Any other questions? Oh, yeah.
Thank you for your presentation.
Sure.
Would you be able to briefly comment on whether there's a difference if RTP is too risky and difficult, or if it's too minimal?
I think that it has to be modeled. Not all parents know exactly those appropriate boundaries in RTP. And so I know in talking to Dr. Fletcher, and he works directly with fathers, oftentimes fathers have to be, not all fathers, but some fathers have to be reminded, like, for example, he does this game with children where fathers are supposed to lay down and then the child's supposed to make sure the dad can't get up. And some fathers will just push the child off and stand right up, and Dr. Fletcher will have to go, okay, you have to let them try a little, you have to make them feel like they're succeeding. So it isn't necessarily intuitive that all parents know that you're working to develop skills with the child. So yeah, you're stronger and you're more capable, but that's not really what you want to model. What you want to model is, how do we play together? And how do we react when one of us gets frustrated? So what's the appropriate emotional responses to that kind of play? And so I do think that some fathers know, they do it really well, and they know, that's far enough, and we don't want to take risks beyond that. And other fathers don't always know that, or other mothers don't always know that. So it isn't just intuitive. I think it has to be potentially something that you would educate about.
Dr. Sheppard, I think at one point you had said that fathers that engage in battle play.
Mm-hmm. That's what Dr. Poquette calls it.
Okay, in battle play with their sons, were less likely to engage in aggressive and battle play sorts of things with their peers.
That's what he's found.
So why, was there some theoretical reason why he wouldn't generalize to their peers?
He thinks that first, fathers set the rules in that kind of play with their children, and they're dominant. And so they establish the sense of dominance with their child, like, I am in control of this situation, and I will tell you when you've gone too far. And so what they actually learn is appropriate limits, not to push too far, because their father's sort of controlling that play experience. So then what he believes is that generalizes in peer relationships where they've learned that there are certain boundaries where you don't go beyond that and you don't push far. So although rough and tumble play is popular with males, in particular male children, those that do it with their fathers and fathers who do it in a sensitive and appropriate way actually don't go as far, and they're less likely to hurt a peer or do something that, you know, could cause upset in the relationship. That's his belief. That's based on his research.
I guess I'm kind of tagging on that and kind of the previous question where there might be some subgroups of fathers that don't do rough and tumble play or their sons that don't like it. Is it really more of this issue of being sensitive and appropriate in the response and play more than the rough and tumble? Like, are some dads just, they get it more because of their rough and tumble nature and the boys do, but there's no detriment to kids or fathers or even mothers playing with their sons if their play is always in that sensitive and appropriate way, where even play in the kitchen with the dolls is, I'm getting frustrated with you, so that you're more regulating all of that rather than it really being solely this rough and tumble aspect, kind of bringing it back to your beginning comments related to attachment in general.
The importance is what you talked about. It's sensitive interactions with the child. So if a child doesn't have a desire or interest in, like, tickle fights or, you know, pillow fights, then doing it probably isn't going to serve any benefit for the child. They're going to cry, I don't want to do this, you know. And so it can't be just automatically applied. I think in the best scenarios, parents are sensitive. They pick up on their child's interests and inclinations, and then they work with that. And so if my child is more comfortable doing a quiet activity on the floor with me, then if I'm engaged with my child, the child's going to benefit from that interaction. It doesn't have to be that I'm wrestling with you and I'm tickling you. It's just that's a kind of play that more fathers do, and they certainly do it more than mothers do. And it's interesting because in some of our research where it's observational studies of toddlers and preschoolers, even when you give them an assigned task, like, let's work on this task together, and it's not that, you'll see fathers like picking their child up in the air and moving them around. It's like, that's not what they were asked to do, but somehow there's something that they want to do physically. And the connection, the physical connection, is important. It's important to children. They enjoy it usually. But you're right, it doesn't have to be wrestling.
I think we have time for some more questions.
Oh.
So you mentioned that rough and tumble play helps to develop emotion regulation strategies. Are there specific strategies that actually fathers use during RTP that help them develop emotion regulation?
A lot of it's modeling, because if you think about that kind of play, and we're thinking about a 2 or a 3-year-old, right? Their emotion regulation is somewhat limited at 2 or 3, so they can get really upset and cry and get angry, right? So it's, how does the father respond to that? You know, do you respond in a way where you kind of cool it down and go, okay, are you all right? You know, maybe we should stop for a while, instead of, like, say, making fun of your child, or, well, if you're going to be a baby, we won't play. You know, so there has to be a sensitive response, and there needs to be modeling of appropriate emotional responses. That's how the children learn. It's like, well, what does my daddy do when I hit him across the face with a pillow? Does he get angry and hit me back really hard, or does he go, okay, need to take a break? You know, that's a little rough. And so, again, I don't know that all fathers intuitively know those limits, because part of that process is learning to control your own emotions. So if you're getting frustrated in the play, you know, you may need to take a break because you're not going to model, you know, an appropriate emotional response.
We have time for one more question.
Do you think that this kind of research on rough and tumble play is kind of limited only to primary caregivers? Is this something that you think would ever expand into the preschool world? And what would that look like? Would it be ethical to say let's all wrestle?
Everyone, it's wrestle time, right?
Yeah.
Instead of
and
math time.
Is it practical to say that is possible the more that this is researched to see the benefits of it, or do you think it's just more of a parental or
I don't
personal?
know, honestly. I think that in some situations that might work with small groups of children. If it's a free-for-all and it's a bunch of children, that could easily get out of hand. And the benefit when it's a parent is that it's one-on-one usually, or maybe one parent and a couple children. So that parent can be very aware of how the children are responding and reacting to the situation and then sort of adjust their behaviors. So I wouldn't say that you couldn't do it if you're not a parent, but I think that, again, you want to have some safeguards in place so that you're being sensitive to the children involved and making sure that it doesn't, disintegrate into real anger or frustration or hurting each other. So that's interesting. I've not seen any research on that. I can certainly talk to Daniel about whether he has, because he does more of the direct observational research. But that's an interesting idea, maybe yet to be explored.
Okay, everybody, I think we're going to be calling it a close for tonight. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate you coming, please. Thank you, Dr. Sheppard, for her very fine talk. You guys have a safe Thanksgiving, and we'll see you next year.